When it comes to immigration reform, the two things you probably hear the most are
Dreamers.
Dreamer.
Dreamers.
and
Build the wall.
Wall.
The wall.
but what about the undocumented migrants who Trump's wall would allegedly prevent from crossing the border? Why do they come in the first place, and what happens to them when they're caught?
They're riding trains, they're sleeping in the deserts, they're going days without drinking water. For a lot of the women that I represent, they're risking being sexually assaulted.
The vast majority of those migrants come from Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Mexico, countries with extremely high homicide rates. While border apprehensions hit a 17-year low right after President Donald Trump's inauguration, that number has now increased for 8 straight months, up to more than 40,000 in December. And out of those 40,000 apprehended migrants, more than 5,000 were unaccompanied minors.
I wanted to see my mom because I hadn't seen her like in a long time. Wanted to escape from Honduras basically because of the gangbangers and all the like terrible things they will do to me if I stay there. And they will say that they were gonna kill me if I didn't join the gang. They killed like one of my family members.
Tiago asked Newsy to hide his identity for safety concerns and because he doesn't want to compromise his ongoing immigration case. He made the journey as an unaccompanied 14-year-old in 5 days from Honduras to the US border in 2014.
Something was in my head like telling me, if you stay, like something's gonna happen, like so you just gotta go now.
Tiago was able to join his family in Chicago, where he's been living for the past 4 years. And with help from pro bono attorneys, he recently got a green card and will soon graduate from high school.
I wanna let other people know that like all immigrants, they don't come here just because they want to. They need to come because they want to escape from the dangers.
Something that might be quite common is mom experienced domestic violence, fled, left child, either with grandparents or some caretaker, and then that situation deteriorated in some way, and then the child seeks out mom to come to the United States.
Many advocates of immigration restrictions argue these migrants also make the journey to the US because they've heard of generous immigration visa programs such as DACA.
We're going to be taking Americans out of jobs and giving those jobs to DACA recipients effectively, and it's going to cause a surge in illegal immigration, which will come in. There's no question. If we grant an amnesty, they will come in.
The flip side of this argument is when the Trump administration advertises tough immigration policies, it deters immigrants from making the journey. But as the recent surge in border apprehensions has shown, deterrence has its limits.
Maybe what will happen is that the numbers will go down a little bit, but then people may get more desperate, they may hire coyotes, they may pay more money, they may do other things because what's causing them to come to the United States is real.
What happens to migrants after they are apprehended depends on these 3 factors: how close to the border they are caught, if they are unaccompanied minors, and if they are Mexicans. First, migrants near US borders have less due process rights than immigrants in the interior. As a result, most migrants caught within 100 miles of a border get placed in expedited removal proceedings and never get to see an immigration judge. That's unless the migrants can prove to an asylum officer they have a credible fear of persecution or torture if returned to their home country.
When you are traveling, for example, people can sort of search your luggage, which they may not be able to do if you're in the interior. We should have more control when we're deciding who should come into our country. And if somebody doesn't present the right types of papers or the documents that they need to enter the country, we should be able to tell them to go home versus someone who's been here for a while and has more ties.
Second, unaccompanied minors receive greater protections because they are considered the most vulnerable of migrants. Their custody must be transferred to the Office of Refugee Resettlement within 72 hours of their apprehension. And while their immigration case proceeds, the ORR detains them in shelters while trying to find family members or other sponsors to release them too. But unaccompanied Mexican kids are treated differently, and that's because the US has a repatriation agreement with Mexico. They're immediately sent back unless border officers believe they can't make independent decisions, are victims of trafficking, or would be persecuted if returned home. But because they're minors, the screening is less adversarial than the credible fear interview for adults.
I think it's important to understand the process. You can participate in the debate, first of all, right? So I think when you know more about what happens to these kids and why they're coming, you're not reacting from your gut. When you hear the issues, you're well informed. And I think that part of the story also needs to be told about what kinds of rights people who are seeking protection in the United States get.